The first night the red light blinked on the hidden camera, Daniel Cross told himself it was love, not paranoia. He stood alone in the dark security room of his glass mansion, watching the live feed of his son's bedroom, and whispered a promise he wasn't sure anyone could hear. "I will protect you, even if I have to watch every breath you take." On the screen, 12-year-old Ethan lay motionless in his motorized bed, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, his legs silent forever after the accident that stole his childhood. Then the door opened, the new maid stepped inside, and Daniel's heart tightened, not with relief, but with fear of what he might discover if he kept watching. Daniel had built his fortune from nothing. Every dollar, every glass wall, every silent hallway of the mansion was proof of his control over chaos. But when a drunk driver shattered Ethan's spine 2 years earlier, control slipped through his fingers like sand. Doctors promised survival, not recovery. Therapists promised progress, not miracles. Daniel promised his son everything and delivered it with money, machines, and rules. Nurses worked in shifts. Caregivers followed strict instructions. No one stayed long enough to get close. Love, Daniel believed, was dangerous. It gave hope, and hope hurt when it failed. That was why he installed the cameras. Officially, they were for safety. Unofficially, they were for trust. He needed to know what happened when he wasn't there, because every time he walked into Ethan's room and saw that practiced smile, he wondered what pain his son hid to protect him. When the previous maid quit without notice, Daniel hired Maria out of necessity. She was quiet, older than most, with tired eyes and hands rough from work. She didn't ask about his wealth. She didn't stare at the machines. She only nodded and said softly, "I understand," when Daniel explained Ethan's condition. The first few days the cameras showed nothing unusual. Maria followed instructions. She cleaned, fed, adjusted pillows. But Daniel kept watching. He always did. One afternoon, when Ethan thought he was alone, Maria sat beside the bed longer than scheduled. Daniel leaned closer to the screen, ready to fire her for breaking protocol. Instead, he saw her take Ethan's hand, not the careful clinical touch of a professional, but the gentle grip of someone who had felt lost before. She spoke quietly, too quietly for the audio to catch. Ethan turned his head toward her, confused at first, then curious. For the first time in months, Daniel saw his son's eyes change. They weren't empty, they were listening. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He replayed the footage again and again, searching for danger, for manipulation, for something that justified his unease. Instead, he saw Maria brushing Ethan's hair the way Daniel's late wife used to. He saw her pause when Ethan's breathing changed, not because a monitor beeped, but because she felt it. Daniel told himself it meant nothing. Kindness was cheap, trust was expensive. Days turned into weeks. Ethan began asking when Maria would return each morning. He spoke more, laughed once, an awkward rusty sound that made Daniel freeze in the doorway. The therapist noticed improved posture, stronger arm movement. They praised routines and equipment. Daniel nodded, but his eyes kept drifting back to the cameras. One evening, long after Maria should have left, Daniel checked the feed and felt his chest tighten. Maria was still there. The lights were dim. The machines were quiet. She had turned off the television and rolled Ethan's chair closer to the window. Daniel's anger flared. He reached for his phone to call security, then stopped. Maria was singing. Her voice was soft, cracked with age and memory. It wasn't a song Daniel recognized, but it carried something ancient and warm. Ethan's eyes were closed. His shoulders, usually tense, were relaxed. When the song ended, Maria whispered something, and Ethan spoke, clearly, painfully, with effort. "I remember when my legs ran." Daniel felt his breath leave him. He watched Maria kneel so they were eye level. She didn't interrupt, she didn't correct. She let the silence stretch, heavy and sacred. Ethan's voice broke as he spoke about the accident, about the fear, about waking up and realizing the world would never move the same way again. No therapist had ever gotten him to say those words. Daniel never had. The next morning, Daniel confronted Maria. His voice was sharp, rehearsed. He accused her of overstepping, of emotional interference, of staying beyond her hours. Maria listened without anger. When he finished, she nodded and said, "You put cameras to protect your son. I stayed to protect his heart." She told Daniel about her own boy, paralyzed by illness, gone before his 15th birthday. She spoke of the nights she sang to him when machines were the only thing answering back. He didn't need me to fix him, she said quietly. He needed me to see him. Daniel wanted to fire her. Instead, he turned and left. That night, the mansion felt emptier than ever. Daniel stood in the security room surrounded by screens and realized how small his world had become. He saw every angle of his house, every movement, but he had missed his son. Slowly, with trembling hands, he began turning the cameras off, one by one. When only Ethan's room remained, he hesitated, then shut it down too. The next day, Daniel asked Maria to stay. Not as an employee under constant watch, but as someone he trusted. He sat beside Ethan's bed for the first time without checking a screen, without planning his next meeting. He listened. It was awkward. It was painful. It was real. Weeks later, Ethan asked if he could try physical therapy again, not because the doctors insisted, but because he wanted to feel progress, however small. Months passed. Ethan's legs did not move, but his spirit did. He painted, he studied, he laughed more. Daniel learned that protection wasn't about control, and love wasn't about surveillance. It was about presence. The cameras stayed off. The mansion felt warmer, and every evening, as Maria's song drifted softly through the halls, Daniel understood the truth he had been too afraid to face. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't walking again. It's being truly seen.